This is Crowmar with TGN, welcoming you to another World of Warcraft Cataclysm beta video. This is part 8 of a 22-part series, DPS Rundown, and today we're looking at the Feral Druid. Feral Druids had a huge buff about a week or two ago. Before that I had done some testing on them and their DPS was pretty poor. That came as a result of the nerf to Savage Roar, since it only affects auto attack damage, but they compensated that by buffing all of the other abilities tremendously. So let's look at that spec. Most of these talent points are actually very easy to place. This is a very easy spec to build. You only got about 6 points outside of Feral that are even useful. There's nothing in balance at all that's even useful at the slightest. And there's only these 6 points. And 2 of them are just a requirement for Master Shapeshifter. So of course you want to get Master Shapeshifter and you want to get Heart of the Wild. That leaves you with 35 points in Feral. And at that point it becomes a question of what don't you get. Because you can just get everything. There's 3 talents that are essentially for bears, although the reducing crit chance for melee attacks on Thick Hide is for cats also. That's really for PvP. The other bonuses are strictly for bear, and so we're not going to be using them for this build. After that, you have a lot of optional talents, including Stampede, which allows you just to open with a Ravage, and occasionally, because you can actually use Feral Charge in combat. So this is actually more useful than just the opening. If you're in any fight where there's a lot of movement, use Feral Charge to catch up and you get your free Ravage, so it's pretty cool. Other talents, we have Brutal Impact, which dramatically lowers the cooldown on Skull Bash. That's your interrupt, from 1 minute to about 10 seconds. So basically it creates I guess you could call it a proper interrupt out of Skull Bash. Nurturing Instinct, your healers will really appreciate that for a lot of reasons. And then we have Infected Wounds, which is basically allows you to put a Thunderclap on the target all the time. Which one's better? I mean, if I went to a raid right now, I'd probably change my spec up and get Brutal Impact, but for the purpose of this test, it doesn't really matter. Okay, moving on to Glyphs. Glyphs are pretty easy. Okay, Rip. Rip is your #1 ability, so this is a must-have. Shred causes your Rip to last a little bit longer, helps with your Rip uptime, and it allows you to spend other combo points on things like Ferocious Bite and so on, so that's clearly very important. And I went with Berserk for my last one because Berserk is so powerful, and anything that increases the duration is good in my book. Your other options, Mangle. You're not going to be using Mangle except to apply the debuff, so I would definitely pass on that. This is more for leveling than anything else. Savage Roar. Unfortunately, this is not a very powerful ability anymore. It's certainly worth the 5 combo points because it's a long duration, but the actual amount of damage you gain from this is minimal compared to Berserk. And then Tiger's Fury. It reduces the cooldown of your Tiger's Fury, allows you to use that a little bit more. That's pretty awesome, but I decided not to still go with Berserk. Now for your rotation, the change to Savage Roar is definitely welcome. It means that Savage Roar is lower in your priority than Rip. You have to maintain your Rip all the time. That's the most important thing. Savage Roar is secondary, and then any extra talent points you get goes in a Ferocious Bite, but there won't be many. There won't be many Ferocious Bites. At this level of gear, with very low crit chance, you're not getting your Primal Fury very often, and as a result, you have combo points are at a premium. So you're going to be struggling just to maintain your buffs. It's going to be difficult to keep Ferocious Biting, and you're mainly going to be doing that during Berserk. So that's about it. So let's see what that looks like. We're going to hit a Fairy Fire, Feral Charge, Ravage, Mangle, Rake. My Mangle missed. There we go. And then we get our Rip up. And now we can start hitting Shred. I'm going to hit my Tiger's Fury to get the bonus in energy. Shred up. Now I can hit Savage Roar. Now it's time to refresh Rake. And by the time I get 5 combo points, my Rip's about to be done, so I'm going to have to refresh Rip. I won't even be able to do a Ferocious Bite at this time in the cycle. Yeah, there we go. Dodge, dodge. Took 3 global cooldowns to get that Rip up. That's just how it is. So that's what that looks like. Let me just get my Mark of the Wild up. Wait for my stuff to drop off. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start the test, and we'll see how the numbers turn out. Okay, let's take a look at those results. Now, the DPS was about 6,600 before when I stopped attacking, and that's about what I usually get. I usually get between 65 and 7,000. I know it's a pretty huge range. That is normal actually for this class because right now it's so RNG dependent. I mean, if you get lucky on your crits and get extra combo points and you manage to keep your uptime and get some ferocious bites in, your DPS goes way up. So obviously crit is going to be a major factor for your druid in the future. Also mastery, and I'll show you why in a minute here. Okay, so your number one skill was Rip. That's not a surprise. Well, that's a little bit of a surprise. Just how powerful it was. It's usually about 30%. It was slightly lower here. I did have it drop off once or twice during the test where I just couldn't keep it up because of this. Couldn't get the combo points in time, but it wasn't down for very long. After the obvious abilities, Rip, Shred, and Melee, we have Rake coming in at 4th place with quite a bit of damage. That's actually pretty insane. 7,800 was my biggest crit. That's a tick on the dot. Pretty amazing. And then you have to add in the instants as well, which aren't much, but you know, it's something. And then Fury Swipes, not bad for 2-point talent. Ferocious Bite, I only got 7 Ferocious Bites over 2,200,000 damage. That tells you something about combo point generation. It performed as expected, I suppose, but it's just not that powerful. It's kind of a reversal of the Rogue, where you have Eviscerate and Rupture, and Eviscerate is so much more powerful than Rupture. On the Druid, Ferocious Bite is about half as powerful as Eviscerate, but Rip is just absolutely insane. So that's why your combo points definitely favor Rip over Ferocious Bite. Mangle, again, was only used to keep the debuff up. It's still a powerful ability, it's just a lot weaker than Shred, so that's why you're not using it for anything else. I only Ravaged in the beginning, and then of course there's the Rake instance. And a couple of misses with Rip. I actually had this dodge and this miss both in a row. That was very annoying. Now I mentioned how important the mastery is for druids, for feral druids. Increases the damage by bleeds by an enormous amount, and 3% per mastery is really incredible because bleeds are about half your damage. And now the question is does Razor Claws work with Shred? Well, on the tooltip it says effects with increased bleed damage also increase Shred damage. So I want to say yes. About 65% of your damage comes from Rip, Shred, and Rake. So if Shred is in fact buffed by Razor Claws, as I suspect it is, that means you're getting, rounding off, about 2% increase total damage per point of mastery. That's a lot. That's incredible. So crit and mastery are your best friends, but then again you also need to cap your hit and expertise so you can actually land things. It's, as usual, being a feral druid means you need a lot of stats, so you need basically everything. Even haste improves it to a degree because it increases your energy regeneration now. So, how do you want to gear your druid? Well, you want all the stats. I don't know which one you want more. You want crit, you want mastery, all of them. But, I mean, that just tells me that feral druids scale like crazy. And that's substantiated by some of the evidence I've seen in raids. If you look closely at my Omatron video, Omatron defense system, number 1 on DPS was a feral druid, or it might have been number 2 with a fury warrior. And that's the general consensus, that feral druids are pretty much tops on DPS right now. At least one of the top classes. So yeah, if you're a feral druid, then good news for you. Hopefully they don't get nerfed. I don't think they will. I think it's more likely they'll actually buff all the other classes because some of the classes are underperforming, especially rogues. Now, in case you're wondering, I did consider a build, or I considered a rotation rather, where I didn't even use Savage Roar so I can get more ferocious bites. I'll save you the trouble of watching it. It didn't work out for me. It was a big drop in DPS. The amount I gained from the extra ferocious bites was very minor compared to the amount I lost off of my auto attacks. So don't try that. You definitely want to keep Savage Roar in your rotation, even though it's not as good as it used to be. Alright, well that does it for the Feral Druid. Thanks for watching. As always, please rate, please comment, and please subscribe.